Imagine a scenario for a second. You acquire a piece of real estate, and instead of just crossing your fingers and hoping for a tenant who pays on time and respects the property, you step into this entirely pre-existing ecosystem.
Right, an ecosystem that is already structured and funded.
Exactly. You build a genuinely profitable, reliable portfolio, and simultaneously, you provide an immediate solution to a massive, urgent community crisis. You are giving vulnerable populations a safe, dignified place to live.
Which is something so many investors want to do, but they don't know the mechanics.
Yeah, and so our mission today is to demystify exactly how property owners pull this off without getting trapped in the wrong business model. We are going to look at the underlying mechanics, the state funding pipelines, and the operational realities of housing vulnerable groups.
Because the structural model you choose at the very beginning, it dictates your entire operational reality. A lot of investors enter this space with incredible intentions.
Oh, for sure.
But because they don't understand the distinct regulatory pathways, they end up taking on the liability of a healthcare provider when they really only wanted to be a landlord.
Yep. And we're going to make sure you know exactly which path you are walking down. Today's deep dive is the Ohio-focused installment of our ongoing series, Assisted Living Facilities versus Special Needs Housing, Knowing the Difference, covering every state.
And Ohio is such a perfect state to focus on for this.
It really is. And I should mention, this series is made possible by our sponsor, Flowers & Associates Property Rentals. They consult with landlords specifically on how to stabilize those rental income streams, which perfectly aligns with what we are dissecting today.
It's a great fit, because stabilizing income is exactly what these models are designed to do if you do them right.
Exactly. And speaking of doing it right, our primary source text for this analysis is a comprehensive guide by Robert Flowers. He's an award-winning real estate investor and the founder of Flowers & Associates, which is an A-plus BBB-accredited firm featured in Who's Who.
Yeah, he brings, over 15 years of in-the-trenches experience to this?
Over 15 years, yeah. And honestly, if you visit his website, he even had this AI real estate agent named Jonathan programmed to assist visitors with these exact property models. So we have a really deep well of practical, on-the-ground expertise to pull from here.
That's amazing. And, when you look at families and investors in Ohio, they are essentially driving toward the exact same destination. They want to create a stable environment where individuals can live with dignity and receive necessary support.
Right.
But assisted living and special needs housing are two fundamentally different investment vehicles. I mean, they serve different populations, they trigger entirely different layers of the Ohio legal code, and they demand vastly different daily time commitments from you as the owner.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I think people use those terms interchangeably.
Sure.
In Ohio, what most people colloquially call assisted living is officially classified by the state as a residential care facility, or RCF.
Right, the RCF designation.
Yeah, and the source material draws a really hard line in the sand right away. Operating an RCF is not a real estate play. It is a healthcare operations play.
It is a fully licensed care model. When you file the paperwork to open a residential care facility in Ohio, you are legally binding yourself to provide hands-on help with the activities of daily living.
You aren't just handing over a set of keys and a lease agreement.
Not at all.
So what does that mandate actually look like on the ground? We hear the phrase activities of daily living, but operationally, how does that dictate an investor's Tuesday morning?
Oh, it dictates every single minute of it. You are legally responsible for assisting residents with bathing, dressing, personal hygiene. You have to manage their medication schedules, which require specific tracking and credentialed staff.
Wait, you're managing their medication?
Yes, exactly. And you're responsible for dietary compliance, meaning providing meals that meet state nutritional guidelines. You handle housekeeping, laundry, and you often have to arrange or directly provide medical transportation. You are managing the entirety of their daily physical existence.
My initial thought here is that this sounds less like being a landlord and more like you are trying to run an apartment complex and a mini hospital at the exact same time.
That's a perfect way to put it.
It's like building a theater, but also having to write, direct, and star in the play every single day. If I am just an investor analyzing cash flow, why would I want this level of complexity? The liability footprint alone must be massive.
Well, what's fascinating here is that the state actually wants it to be complex because vulnerable lives are on the line.
Right, that makes sense.
But from a business perspective, assisted living is a deeply meaningful and potentially highly lucrative enterprise for the right operator. You are serving seniors and adults who literally cannot survive without that daily support.
But it requires a specific type of person.
Exactly. It requires an operator who is completely comfortable running a healthcare organization. Because the Ohio Department of Health, specifically the Bureau of Regulatory Operations, they do not treat you like a landlord. They treat you like a clinic.
So they're actively auditing your business.
Constantly. I mean, they conduct rigorous, unannounced on-site inspections. You are scrutinized under the Ohio Administrative Code.
And this isn't just a building inspector checking to see if your deck is up to code.
Oh, no, no. The state dictates your staff-to-resident ratios. They check your medication administration logs. They review your emergency evacuation procedures.
And the physical building itself has to change, right?
Massively. It requires commercial grade modifications. You're talking specialized bathroom setups with specific grab bar dimensions, commercial kitchen requirements, interconnected fire suppression systems, widened hallways.
So you're dealing with health inspectors who can basically shut down your entire revenue stream if, like, a staff member mismanages a medication log.
Yes.
And it probably requires millions in startup capital just to get the building compliant before a single resident even moves in.
That is the harsh reality of the RCF model.
Yeah.
It is highly regulated precisely because the owner assumes total care liability.
Right. And because that regulatory burden and that huge capital requirement is simply too high for most independent real estate investors, the market and the state of Ohio itself has developed a secondary pathway.
Yes, a much more accessible pathway.
A model that cleanly separates the real estate from the healthcare. And this brings us to special needs housing.
This model completely shifts the operational paradigm. It is a housing-first approach designed to solve the critical shortage of accessible living spaces, but without forcing the property owner to become a nurse.
Which is huge. And the population served here is incredibly broad, right? We're talking about individuals with developmental or physical disabilities, people managing mental health challenges, veterans transitioning to civilian life, and individuals navigating reentry or homelessness.
All groups that desperately need supportive housing to live independently.
Exactly. But the structural pivot here, the absolute core of this strategy for an investor, is that you do not touch the medical care.
You step entirely out of the healthcare equation.
You do not log medication. You do not cook the meals. You do not manage the bathing routines. You are simply providing a safe, clean, properly maintained physical structure. Like my earlier analogy, you own the theater, but someone else directs the play.
That's exactly it. The care is completely outsourced to dedicated agencies. Ohio has built these robust, really well-funded systems to deliver support directly into community homes.
So your role is just to provide the physical container where that care can actually take place.
Right.
So let's talk about the mechanics of that money flow, because this is where I think investors get a bit confused. If the tenant has a severe developmental disability, how is the rent getting paid? And how is the caregiver getting paid? Like, who's actually funding this?
Okay, so the funding mechanisms are totally separated. For the care side, a massive driver in Ohio is the Medicaid HCBS waiver. That stands for Home and Community-Based Services. The state of Ohio recognized a long time ago that it is vastly cheaper and honestly far better for the individual to pay for care in a private home rather than institutionalizing someone in a giant state facility.
Oh, absolutely.
So the individual receives a Medicaid waiver. That waiver pays a third-party, state-approved care agency to send nurses or aides into your property. You, as the landlord, you do not touch the waiver money at all.
Got it. So the agency manages the staff, the payroll, and the medical liability. But what about the rent?
So the rent is often stabilized through distinct housing subsidies. A really key example in Ohio is the Ohio 811 program.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's a project-based rental assistance program specifically for extremely low-income adults with disabilities. The state channels federal funds to subsidize the rent, which ensures the landlord receives market rate, or at least near market rate payments.
Okay, and what does the tenant pay?
The tenant only pays a small, manageable percentage based on their fixed income, like their SSI.
Wow, so the state is subsidizing the rent directly to the landlord while simultaneously paying an outside agency to provide care inside the unit.
Exactly. And another really fascinating model Robert Flowers highlights in the source text is Ohio shared living.
Oh, what is that?
This functions almost like an adult foster care system. A caregiver actually lives in the home full-time with the individual who has a developmental disability, and the state pays the caregiver a tax-free stipend for the care they provide.
Oh, wow. So as an investor, you might rent, say, a duplex to this caregiver individual pair.
Yes, and it creates an incredibly stable tenancy because the home is the literal foundation for the caregiver's livelihood as well as the individual's well-being.
That is amazing. But, I have to play devil's advocate for a second and look at the blind spots here.
Sure.
So I just buy a house, hand over the keys, and collect passive income. I am imagining a scenario where I own the house and the third-party agency's caregiver accidentally leaves the stove on,
Right.
causing a major fire, or, a resident damages the drywall during a severe mental health crisis.
Right, the liability question.
Yeah. If I am separated from the care, how insulated am I really from the liability of what happens inside my house? There have to be some rules, right? The state can't possibly absolve the landlord of all responsibility.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you are absolutely retaining your real estate liability. You are insulated from medical malpractice, sure, but you are still a property owner subject to standard and specialized real estate laws.
Okay, so let's address the damage question first.
When you partner with these care agencies, you don't just hand over the keys on a handshake. You establish highly structured lease agreements and often an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, with the agency itself.
So the agency kind of provides a layer of insurance.
Yes. Reputable care agencies carry substantial liability insurance for their staff's actions. So if an aide leaves the water running and ruins the hardwood floors, the agency's insurance is typically the very first line of defense.
That's a relief.
But regarding tenant damage, you manage it the exact same way you would any property right, through security deposits, standard wear and tear clauses, and your standard landlord insurance policies.
Right. And what about the regulatory side? Because for my more experienced investors listening, they know zoning isn't just about commercial versus residential.
Oh, absolutely not. Special needs housing is absolutely not a free-for-all. You have to be hyper aware of healthcare-specific zoning laws and local city ordinances. Just because you aren't an RCF doesn't mean you can place 5 unrelated adults in a single-family home without checking local density and boarding house regulations.
Yeah, cities are very strict about that.
Furthermore, you are bound tightly by the Fair Housing Act. You must navigate reasonable accommodations. So, if a tenant needs a specialized ramp or, say, a lowered countertop, you have to understand the legal thresholds of what you are required to allow and sometimes even pay for to keep the property accessible.
So it requires a sophisticated landlord, but it does not require a hospital administrator. I think that is the critical distinction here.
Exactly. You are managing leases, compliance, and property maintenance, not nursing schedules.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The actual execution of this strategy. We understand the models now. We know the funding mechanisms exist. But let's look at where this is happening and what the financial barrier to entry actually is.
The barrier to entry is the defining metric that pushes most independent investors away from assisted living and right into special needs housing.
Because with assisted living, as we covered earlier, you are looking at commercial loans. You are buying commercial kitchen hoods, retrofitting entirely new fire suppression systems, and carrying this massive payroll before the doors even open.
Right. It is a multi-million-dollar lift in many cases. But with special needs housing, your entry point could literally be a standard residential duplex you already own.
That's incredible.
You do not need a state facility license to rent a home to someone who receives outside care.
So the capital deployment shifts from building a full-on medical facility to simply optimizing a residential property. You might spend $5,000 to $10,000 making a bathroom ADA compliant, adding a wheelchair ramp, maybe widening a few doorways.
Yeah, your primary investment is actually time. It's the time spent networking with the county boards of developmental disabilities, the local mental health agencies, and the waiver providers.
You're essentially building a pipeline.
Exactly. You are building strategic partnerships so that when you have a vacant, accessible unit, these agencies immediately place their clients in your property.
And Robert Flower's guide drives home a crucial point about the geography of this demand. This isn't just a niche strategy for one specific suburb. There is a staggering quantified need for this exact model across every major Ohio urban center.
Oh, everywhere.
Yeah, he specifically calls out Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton, Toledo, Akron, and Youngstown. The agencies in these cities are just desperate.
Because the bottleneck in the system isn't funding. The Medicaid waivers are funded. The Ohio 811 subsidies are funded. The bottleneck is the actual physical real estate.
The houses themselves.
Right. Care agencies have clients ready to transition out-of-state facilities or homeless shelters, but they simply cannot find safe, reliable, accessible housing run by landlords who understand how these programs work.
They are looking for strategic partners. So if you have an accessible duplex in Dayton, the local Developmental Disabilities Board essentially becomes your marketing department. They bring the tenant to you.
It fundamentally changes the entire tenant acquisition process. You aren't paying for listings on rental websites. You are fulfilling a standing order from a state-backed agency.
So synthesizing everything we've covered today, the choice for the listener is clear, but it requires some deep self-reflection. Do you want to build a licensed, hands-on care organization, managing medical staff and navigating Department of Health audits? Or do you want to leverage your real estate portfolio to provide the physical foundation for third-party care providers?
And look, Ohio needs both. The aging population desperately needs high-quality assisted living facilities. But the thousands of adults with disabilities and housing barriers desperately need community-integrated special needs housing.
They are basically two sides of the same coin, but they require entirely different investor DNA.
Completely. One is a very heavy operational business, and the other is a specialized asset management strategy.
So what does this all mean? It means that your real estate portfolio can be leveraged to generate reliable state-backed revenue while simultaneously acting as a stabilizing force in your community. You can literally align your financial goals with profound social impact, provided you understand the structural rules of the game.
And Robert Flowers has built a 15-year career proving that this exact synthesis is totally possible.
Absolutely. If you are an investor looking to bypass the heavy medical liability while still capturing the incredible stability of state-subsidized supportive housing, you really need the full blueprint. Robert Flowers has published a comprehensive guide on this exact methodology.
It's an incredible resource.
It really is. The book is called The Joy of Helping Others: Creating Passive Income Streams Through Special Needs Housing. It breaks down all the agency partnerships, the funding pipelines, and the property modifications we discussed today, and it is available right now on Amazon.
Yeah, if you want to understand how to actually approach a county board or write an MOU with a care agency, that text is the operational standard.
Additionally, the landscape of special needs housing is constantly evolving, and there's a massive community actively discussing these strategies for free right now on Facebook. Do yourself a favor and start following Robert Flowers, author, on Facebook.
Highly recommend that.
Tap into that network, ask questions about the Ohio 811 program, and see how other landlords are structuring their portfolios.
You know, this raises an important question, something for everyone to kind of chew on.
What's that?
We are conditioned as investors to view tenant turnover, missed rent, and property damage as the ultimate risks of real estate, right?
Of course, that's what keeps landlords up at night.
But if you partner with state-backed agencies where rent is subsidized and caregivers are present in the home, how might that fundamentally change our entire cultural definition of a safe real estate investment?
Wow, yeah. It really challenges everything we assume about traditional landlording.
Yeah.
We will leave you to explore that on your own. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.